Something is changing inside the UK pension system right now, and most people watching this have no idea it has already started. 3 different bodies, DWP, PPF, and TPR, have quietly released information this week that could reshape how your pension is protected, valued, and paid out. And almost no one noticed. This is not just another routine update. This is the kind of information that sits buried in official documents, written in language designed so most people scroll past it. But if you have a workplace pension, a defined benefit scheme, or you're simply planning for retirement, what happened this week actually touches you directly, whether you realize it yet or not. Welcome. If you are new here, you're about to get the clearest, most honest breakdown of what just happened in the UK pension world, explained the way it should have been explained to you in the first place. Let's start with what is actually happening, because the story doesn't begin where you'd expect. It begins with a single word buried inside a government document this week: roadmap. The DWP has just updated its pensions roadmap, and on the surface that sounds boring. A timeline, a list of dates. But look closer and you start to see something else. This roadmap quietly reveals exactly when your pension rights are going to shift, when new rules kick in, and when older protections start to change shape. And the dates? They've moved. Not by accident. Deadlines that were expected sooner have now been pushed further out, and some that seemed distant are suddenly closer than people think. But here's where things start to get serious. Buried in that same roadmap is a date: April 2027. That is when new rules allow the release of pension scheme surplus. In plain terms, this is about money sitting inside pension schemes that has, for years, simply stayed locked away. Starting in 2027, some of that money can be released. Now stay with me, because this next part changes everything. Depending on how your scheme is run, that surplus release could mean stronger backing for your pension, or it could mean decisions get made about money that used to sit there purely as a safety cushion. Either way, something that used to be untouchable is now on the move. And that's not the only date buried in this roadmap. There's a bigger one: 2030. By April 2030, pension schemes will be required to consolidate what's known as small pots, and workplace pension providers will need to hold a minimum of £25 billion in assets within their default fund. If that number means nothing to you right now, don't worry, it will by the end of this video. Because what it really signals is this: the entire structure of workplace pensions in this country is being pushed toward consolidation. Smaller schemes, smaller providers, smaller pension pots scattered across old jobs, all of that is being funneled into fewer, much larger systems. And when systems get bigger, control shifts. Who controls your money starts to matter more than ever. But wait, it gets even more surprising. There's another date hiding in this timeline that almost nobody is talking about: guided retirement. Somewhere between 2029 and 2030. Master trusts and regulated pension providers will be required to offer what's called a default retirement pathway. This means that when you retire, instead of you actively choosing what happens to your pension pot, there will be a preset default option waiting for you. You can still opt out. You can still make your own choice. But if you do nothing, the system decides for you. Now think about that for a second. For years, pension freedom meant you were fully in control. This is the first real sign that the system is quietly building a version of retirement where the default choice, not your choice, becomes the starting point for millions of people. Now, this could affect your future in ways you didn't expect, because at the same time this roadmap was being updated, the DWP also launched a major consultation on something called value for money. VFM for short. This is where things get uncomfortable for pension providers, but potentially very good for you. Under this new framework, workplace pension schemes will be required to prove, with real data, that they are actually delivering value, not just decent returns, real, measurable value compared to other schemes. And here's the twist: schemes that fail to prove it will be rated red or amber. A red or amber rating isn't just embarrassing for a pension provider. It can trigger real consequences. But here's what most people are not being told. The first full assessments don't start until 2028, and the real consequences for failing providers won't apply until 2029. That means for the next few years, underperforming pension schemes get what is essentially a grace period. If your pension provider has been quietly underperforming for years, you won't see the consequences show up immediately. You have to check for yourself. Nobody is going to tap you on the shoulder and tell you your pension might be falling behind. This is exactly the kind of hidden gap most people never think to look for until it's too late. Now let's move to the second piece of this story, and this one is bigger than most people realize. The Pensions Regulator, TPRE, has just released its brand new corporate strategy covering 2026 through 2031. Alongside it, a fresh regulatory roadmap and a new corporate plan for the year ahead. This isn't routine paperwork. This is TPR essentially rewriting its own rulebook on how closely it watches pension schemes and where its attention is going to be focused for the next 5 years. And this is where the pattern interrupt comes in, because at the exact same time, TPR quietly brought into force a revised code of practice for something called Collective Defined Contribution Schemes, CDC for short. This new code takes effect on the 31st of July, just days from now, and what it does is significant. It now allows CDC pension arrangements to be shared across multiple unconnected employers. In simple terms, pension pooling between completely separate companies is now legally possible in a way it wasn't before. If you've never heard of CDC schemes, you're about to hear a lot more about them, because this shift just opened the door to an entirely new category of workplace pension becoming mainstream in the UK. Stay with me, because this next part changes everything about how you should think of your own pension safety net. This week, the Pension Protection Fund, the PPF, released its annual report. And the numbers inside it tell a story that almost nobody outside the pensions industry has actually read. The PPF now holds more than £15 billion in reserves. Assets under management have grown to £31.5 billion. Over the past year, its investment portfolio returned 7.1%. It paid out £1.2 billion in compensation to members whose pension schemes collapsed. This is the safety net. This is the fund that exists so that if your employer becomes insolvent and your pension scheme cannot pay what it promised, you are not left with nothing. And here's the part that should genuinely catch your attention. Because the PPF's finances are now this strong, it has confirmed something remarkable. It will not charge a levy on conventional defined benefit schemes for the 2025 to 2026 or 2026 to 2027 years. Zero levy for thousands of UK pension schemes. That might sound like a small technical detail, but it isn't. That levy used to be a mandatory cost schemes had to pay simply to exist inside the PPF's protection. Removing it changes the financial pressure on defined benefit schemes across the entire country. But there's something even more personal buried in this update, something that could directly affect real people receiving PPF compensation right now. The government has announced it intends to change the law to allow inflation increases, indexation, on what's called pre-97 pension compensation. If your original pension scheme provided for inflation increases on pension rights built up before 1997, and your scheme later fell into the PPF, this change could directly increase your payments. Officials estimate this could benefit more than 250,000 people. 256,000 real people, potentially seeing their compensation adjusted for the first time to reflect inflation the way it always should have. Now, this is the point where you need to be paying full attention, because here's what most people are not being told. None of this happens automatically just because it was announced. These changes require legislation. They require timelines. They require you personally to understand what applies to your specific situation, because general announcements never fully explain individual cases. And this is where the DWP, TPR, and PPF all connect back into one single story, a pension system that is being rebuilt in real time, piece by piece, mostly outside public attention. There's one more piece of this puzzle you need to know about because it has a hard deadline attached to it. Pension dashboards. This is the system designed to let you, for the very first time, see all of your pensions, old jobs, current jobs, forgotten pots, in one single place. The connection deadline for pension schemes to plug into this dashboard system is the 31st of October this year. TPR has already signaled it will take firm enforcement action against schemes that fail to connect on time, especially where the failure looks willful or reckless. This matters to you directly, because if your old pension provider misses this deadline, your data might not show up properly when dashboards finally go live to the public. That's not a distant, abstract policy issue. That's your money potentially becoming harder to track. So now let's bring all of this together, because this is where it stops being separate stories and becomes one bigger picture. The DWP is rewriting the entire long-term roadmap for how pensions are managed, funded, and paid out over the next decade. TPR is expanding its regulatory reach and tightening enforcement, especially around new arrangements like CDC schemes and dashboard connections. And the PPF, the safety net behind all of it, is financially stronger than it has been in years, strong enough to eliminate levies and expand compensation fairness for hundreds of thousands of people. Here's why this matters to you, specifically. If you have a workplace pension, some of these changes will eventually touch you, whether it's how your provider is rated for value, whether your scheme moves toward a CDC-style pooled arrangement, whether your retirement defaults to a preset pathway unless you actively choose otherwise, or whether your scheme's dashboard connection happens smoothly or gets delayed. None of these things are things a pension provider is going to sit you down and explain personally. You have to know to ask. So what should you actually do with this information? Keep it simple. Check who your current pension provider is and see whether they've said anything publicly about value for money ratings or dashboard connection progress. If your scheme is a defined benefit scheme, especially one with pre-1997 service, keep an eye on how the PPF indexation change gets implemented because that could directly affect real payments. And if you're within the next 5 to 10 years of retirement, start paying attention to how guided retirement defaults are shaping up. Because the choice that used to be entirely yours may soon come with a pre-selected path attached to it, unless you say otherwise. If you've made it this far, you now understand something that most people watching pension headlines this week completely missed. This isn't just bureaucratic paperwork sitting in government archives. It's the early blueprint for how millions of retirements in this country are going to work over the next decade. Stay aware, stay ahead of it, and don't let the next announcement catch you off guard. Subscribe and stay one step ahead of what's coming next.